Welcome to Breaking the Silence Mental Health Conversations with your hosts, Kim Oliver and Dr. Richard Doss. Together, we'll break the silence and challenge the stigma by speaking now. So, take a deep breath, get comfortable, and let's dive in. It's time to start the conversation.
And so he asked me the question. He said, Richard, how much money do you want to make a year? And I thought for a moment, and I said, $100,000. And he was silent for a moment, and then he turned to me and asked, why didn't you say $600,000 a year or $700,000 a year? And my response to him was, I didn't say that because that's not realistic.
Right.
A psychologist can't make that kind of money. I don't know anybody who makes that kind of money. The wealthiest person in my family at the time was making about $60,000. And so for me to think that I could make more than 100,000 just didn't seem real. Or you think about the person who, barely gets out of high school and thinks that going to college isn't possible, or getting a job that makes more than 20 or 30 or $40,000 a year. That's not possible. So the same guy who asked me how much I wanted to make, he was making $84,000, and he was my supervisor, and he said, the next job that I get, I'm going to make $150,000. And in my limited mindset, the thing that I said to him is, that's unrealistic. Everybody knows that you can only make 10% more than what you're making now. So if you're making $80,000 now, your next job is going to be $88,000. Everybody knows that. And so a few months went by and he was interviewing, and finally he says to me, Richard, guess what? Got a job. And I was like, congratulations. And I'm thinking, yeah, he got that $88,000. And he says, yeah, I'm at $152,000. And I asked myself, how in the world did he do that? And then I asked him, how did you do that? And he said, I only applied to jobs that paid $150,000 or more a year.
Smart.
I hadn't even thought of that. I hadn't even thought of that. If I want a $150,000 a year job, you mean that I should start applying to them? Do you mean that kind of job actually exists? But because I had already put limitations on myself, I believed that I could only make what I was making, and if I were to make more, it'd only be 10% more. So I don't think it's always that other people put limitations on us, Kim.
Sure, we do our own. And it's not just in the area of money either. I know people who think, I'm not going to find my Prince Charming. People don't have real Prince Charmings. That's all in movies. I might find a man who can put food on the table, and that's enough for me, because that's what my dad did. That's what my mom got, So it's not just jobs and finances. We do that with our happiness, with our relationships, and really any other goal we might have. We think we put limitations on what's realistic based on what we know.
And I think a lot of times we start off limited. And so, I work with people every day. I do marriage counseling as well. And so sometimes I'll ask a couple, what would your relationship look like if it was healthy? And I'll get each spouse to say, I don't know, because I've never been in a healthy relationship.
And they've probably never seen one either.
So if you've never been in a healthy relationship, you've never seen a healthy relationship, how do you even, as we talk about stuck points, how do you even strive for something that you've never seen? How do you strive for something that you believe that you can't have, or something that you believe that you can't become? I think you get stuck and complacent. You get in that rut that Sometimes it's a rabbit hole, but you're down in the rabbit hole and you're planting grass. You're getting some new furniture for the rabbit hole, when there's a whole world that exists outside of that place. Yeah, so man, as we have this conversation, is there more that you want? Is there more that you believe that you deserve? Is there more that you believe that you can have? Is it that you don't know how to get there? Is it that you don't know where you want to be? Or is the better question, what's keeping you where you are? Is it that you don't want to put in the work? Is it some fear that if I try it and I fail, that people will talk about me, or I might be embarrassed? Kim, is there anything wrong with putting forth a great effort and not reaching your goal? Is that failure?
Not to me. When I started my business in 2004, I left home. I lived in Pennsylvania in a rural town. I think I was making $60,000 a year as an administrator at a foster care agency. And I wanted to be my own boss. I wanted to have my own business. And so I put all my things in a U-Haul truck and towed my car and drove across part of the country anyway to get to Chicago, and started my own business. And I didn't know anything about business. I knew how to talk to people. That's what I do. I talk to people for a living. And I wasn't sure what was going to happen. I didn't really know what would happen. And I think that is sometimes what stops us from getting what we want, is we don't have a clear vision about what we want. We can't make progress towards something that's fuzzy. It has to be crystal clear. So we have to take the time to really think about, if I were this person that I really want to be, if I had the relationship I really want, what would that look like? What would it feel like? What would I be doing? And just spend some time thinking about it and getting it really clear in your mind. And the other thing I wanted to say, based on what you had mentioned, is the fear of failure. I think sometimes the true fear is the fear of success. Ooh. What if I am successful? What happens to my friends? What happens to the people I know? How will my life change in ways that maybe I'm not ready for it to change? And then we're self-sabotaging. That kind of stuff usually happens under the conscious surface of our mind. It's deeper. We don't even know it's happening, but we'll have a foot on the gas and we're going down the highway ready to get to our destination, and somehow we got a foot on the brake. We don't even know it's there. And that can stop us from being successful. It happens, I mentioned authors. It happens with authors all the time. I remember asking one woman who was really struggling getting over the hump of actually finishing her book. She was like this close, and she just couldn't execute. And I asked her to get still for a minute and just relaxed and tell me the first thing that came out of her, the first thought that came to her head. Don't think about it, just speak the first thing that comes to her head. And I said to her, what would you have to give up to be the successful author that you want to be? And what came out of her mouth was my privacy. She was afraid if she became this successful author that she couldn't go to the grocery store, she couldn't have a meal out at a restaurant without people flocking to her for autographs and things like that. And I kind of chuckled because the life of an author, unless you're like one of the top 20 authors in the country, most people don't know who you are. And they won't come flocking to you when they see you. I'm an author, I've written 5 books, and I can go grocery shopping without getting mobbed, and I can still go out to eat without getting mobbed. But these things are big things. I asked a woman once who was struggling losing weight, what would you have to give up to lose the weight you want? And just tell me the first thing that comes to mind. And she was shocked to answer, my husband. And I said, what? Tell me about that. And she basically said her dysfunction was food and his dysfunction was alcohol. And they were equally yoked in their dysfunction. Okay. And if she got over her problem with food, then he would look worse to her than he does now. And she might have to leave him, and she didn't want to leave him. Wow. So then the question becomes not which is more important to you, but can you think of a way that you could have both? Because people don't like to give up stuff. So how can you keep your marriage to your husband and still lose the weight that you want? And she decided to lose half the weight that she wanted to lose. She wanted to lose 100. She ended up losing 60, put 10 back on. So her goal was to lose 50. Yeah. And she stayed with her husband, and miraculously, her husband started to drink less. Not because she did or said anything to him, it just happened. Wow. And so it worked out for her. But if it didn't, she may lose the weight and decide, you know what, this feels so good, I want to keep going. And if I end up leaving my husband, then I end up leaving my husband. But we have to identify what that thing is that might be getting in our way. So it's fear of success, I think, that can cause subconscious sabotage. And unless we bring it out of the dark and the recesses of our subconscious and put it out in the light where we can really see it for what it is, it's going to keep one of our feet on the brakes.
One of the things I believe is that, one of the things we hear is that birds of a feather flock together. And so if I'm a pigeon, do I see myself soaring with eagles? Right.
You probably don't think it's possible. Pigeons don't fly that high.
Right. It's not even remotely an option. One of the questions that you might ask yourself, who are you? Who do you see yourself as being? And if birds of a feather flock together, have you surrounded yourself with ambitious people? Have you surrounded yourself with loving people? Have you surrounded yourself with people who exemplify the kinds of things you talk about wanting to have or wanting to be? Or are you afraid that if I do more, have more, become more, then somebody might frown upon me, or somebody might think that I'm too big for my britches? Sometimes they talk about crabs in a barrel, pulling one another down. Are you pulling others down? Do you think others will pull you down? Are you ready to climb? Are you ready to grow? If you're ready to move from the place where you feel like you're stuck, then I'm glad you've come to this conversation that we started today. This is the beginning of your journey. This is a journey that can change your life. And as Kim already said, you don't have to wait for the wizard. Dorothy, you've always had the power to change. All you had to do was click your heels 3 times. All you have to do is make up in your mind that you want more, you want to become more, that you want to move in a different direction. let today be the first day on the beginning of that journey. My name is Dr. Richard Doss. Kim Olver has been amazing once again, and we thank you for sharing this time with us. We'll see you next time on Breaking the Silence, Mental Health.
I just want to say, if you have any topics or areas that you would like Richard and I to focus on in future videos, just drop a comment here. Send us an email at the address that's on the screen.